I really don't care what anybody says. I firmly believe that our clothes play such a pivotal role in not only who we are, but of course how we feel. As a conscious style coach, my job is to help you curate a wardrobe that not only you love, of course, but one that really works for you, and one that also just makes getting dressed a lot easier in the long run. So that's exactly what we're going to be doing today as I walk you through the 3 most important steps, in my opinion, to creating a wardrobe that you love, which are define, refine, and rebuild. And if you want to see more videos on how to build a mindful, intentional wardrobe, make sure you hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. And without further ado, let's get right into it. Now, before we get into all of the steps and we break them down with everything that I recommend for you, there are 3 important things that I want you to keep in mind as we walk through this video. Number 1, this process does take time. I know it can be easy to feel really antsy about getting it done as quickly as possible, but the reality is that if you want to create an intentional wardrobe, it does take time. It can take months, it can sometimes take a year, 2 years, totally depends on your individual circumstances, but my biggest piece of advice to you is to be patient and just take your time. The other thing that I want you to know is that building a wardrobe you love is not a frivolous thing, and please don't let anybody tell you otherwise. It should be fun, it should be exciting, it shouldn't be a stressful process. Yes, there are times where it'll probably feel a little bit stressful, but the whole entire thing should be a generally pleasing, fun experience. So if you feel overwhelmed by anything that I mentioned today, any step that I recommend that you take, just walk away from this video. You can save it for later. You can come back tomorrow, next week, next month, whenever it's convenient for you. And the last thing I want you to keep in mind as we walk through this video is that no 2 journeys are the same. So do me a favor and do yourself a favor, leave any comparison at the door. I'm going to be sharing with you guys a lot of recommendations in this video, stuff that has worked for me, but if you're like, that's not going to work for me for one reason or another, leave it at the door. It's totally fine. Take what you need, leave what you don't. And with that, let's move into the first section I want to talk about, which is the define step. Now, all of these steps are going to have little steps inside of them. So again, take what you want, leave what you don't. Now, the define step is really important, and I think it's one of the things that a lot of people skip when they are looking to rebuild their wardrobe, because you're not taking immediate action. It's a lot of self-reflection and just thinking about your life on a deeper level as it relates to your clothes. And the first step that I recommend you take with this is actually defining what your life consists of. Now, I know that this might sound simple, like, Hailey, I live in my life every single day. I know what's going on, but this is a really critical step and something that you need to think about to avoid shopping for your fantasy self and making sure that you are shopping for the most realistic alive version of you. So what I want you to do, and write this down if you would like to. I actually recommend writing it down. I feel like when you put things on paper or in your phone or whatever, it is just easier to comprehend. I want you to write down 3 to 5, give or take, consistent activities within your life, either on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis. So things that you are doing consistently that require you to wear clothes, which is, pretty much all the time. So here's some examples of what your life might consist of. You might work from home. You might go into the office. You might run errands on the weekend. You might drop your kids off at school every morning. I'm not saying you have to dress to the nines to drop your kids off at school. I'm just saying it's something that you have to get dressed for. You go to the gym a couple times a week. You go on date nights, you go out to brunch, you hang out with your friends, you go to a book club, potentially. Or maybe you spend a lot of your time just relaxing at home. Still gotta get dressed for that. And again, not necessarily dressed to the nines, but you gotta have clothes for that. And if your wardrobe is full of jeans and you're spending most of your time at home, you probably want some comfy clothes, right? I digress. Now, once you've mapped out and defined all of these consistent activities, I want you to rank them in terms of what you're doing the most and then what you're doing the least. And this step I think is important because if you are going into an office a majority of the time, but 60-70% of the clothes in your wardrobe are like active wear or super comfy clothes, sweatpants and whatnot. Like, as much as we all want to wear sweatpants to the office, we can't. So this is where the balance comes into play of realizing, oh, I have enough in this one category, I don't really need anything else for that, or I don't have enough for this one thing and I need more. So this step is all about grounding your wardrobe within the biggest parts of your life. So the next step I want you to take is to define what your style goals are. So think of these goals as the North Star, right? Like, they are going to guide you and help keep you on track when it comes to actually rebuilding your wardrobe. Now, your goals by no means have to be super rigid and super strict. In fact, I think they should be fairly flexible, because as we go throughout this journey, we're just going to learn more about ourselves, and we need to be open to being flexible and changing those goals. So for example, here are my personal style goals for the year. I want to add more colorful pieces and more visually interesting pieces to my closet. I want to continue prioritizing comfort to make sure that I feel as good as I look within my clothes. And I want to focus more on bringing high quality clothes into my life. So those are mine. Maybe they'll help you jumpstart a little bit. And again, this is another thing that if you need to step away from this video and think about it, then go for it. Your goals can be as broad or as specific as you'd like. And even if you only have one goal, that is also totally fine. You don't have to have a whole laundry list of what you would like to, fix about your wardrobe. This is just about creating some type of focus, okay? Not perfection. Okay, so you have what your life consists of, you have your style goals, or at least you're working on them. The next thing that I want you to define are your immediate no's. This is all about defining and actually acknowledging what no longer works for you. So you can stop wasting your time, you can stop wasting your money with items that just don't align with your preferences. Now, these are your immediate no's, so the things that come, to the top of your mind. We are going to be diving into your actual closet in a couple of steps. So if you're not sure, and maybe you need to take a trip within your closet, totally fine to figure it out. But I know for me, my absolute immediate no's are any super duper bright colors, anything like super pastel or vibrant, not for me. I also know that I don't like fabric that is made of a high percentage of synthetic materials. And I really, really don't like any tight, form-fitting items. Like, I just don't like things that are really tight on me. Especially pants, okay? So after you've defined your immediate no's, I want you to, of course, look at your immediate yeses. But I also want you to break this down into two categories if possible. I think that this will help you a lot. The first thing I want you to think about is what you love in theory. So these are the things that you admire, that you've seen maybe from afar and you really appreciate when other people wear them or style them a certain way or whatever, but you haven't actually put it in practice yourself. Now, remember that we have to be realistic. This is not about looking at people who are, dressing in a way that is unattainable for our lives. We have to make sure we're putting our critical thinking skills into place to say, I love that in theory, and I think I could put it into practice. And the other category that I want you to think about is what you love in practice. So what are you actually wearing now? What have you worn before that you absolutely adore? It could be a color or a silhouette or a fabric or even a combination of items. Like, what is the aesthetic that makes you happy, or aesthetics? It doesn't have to be just one, of course. What makes you confident? What makes you excited to get dressed? What are the pieces in your wardrobe that you are reaching towards the most often, and why? So by separating what you love in theory and then what you love in practice, you'll be able to better understand the balance of experimenting with new things, of course, and also leaning into what actually works for you. Okay, so the last thing I want you to consider for this define step is to define inspiration. Now, before I get into how you can define inspiration, I just want to stress that your inspiration needs to be rooted in reality. Okay, so we just went through all of these steps with what your life consists of, the style goals, the no's, the yeses, and you have to stay loyal to those. Okay, do not get caught up in the idea of replicating someone's life. You want to find styles and outfits and aesthetics that actually work for the life that you have. Okay, so how do you actually get started with finding inspiration? First things first, I'm still very loyal to Pinterest. However, I was on Reddit last night, of course, and I was reading that a lot of people are finding Pinterest to be very spammy in a way, very ad heavy, very AI heavy is what I read a lot. Now, I don't personally see that. It might be just because of what I'm specifically searching. I'm a very niche searcher. I'm not just like winter outfits. I'm like denim outfits with belt, like something a little bit more deep. So that's what works for me. I recommend getting as specific as possible if you can. Go for it. Otherwise, I also recommend Net-a-Porter, which is a retailer, a very expensive retailer at that. However, they have an amazing, styling team. They have really done a good job of putting different outfits together and, acting as inspiration for me at least. I do think that that will fall into a certain type of aesthetic that not everyone is going to want. So check it out if you feel like it. If not, totally fine. You can also refer to any of your favorite creators that you love, and again, that are rooted in reality. People that you could actually use as inspiration for your real life. So I recommend aiming for anywhere from 5 to 10 inspiration pictures. You don't have to go crazy here. A few is fine. And then you can just save them into an album. You could print them out and put them on a vision board. That might be a little extra. Do what you want. I put mine into a collage on Canva. Works great for me. But you want to use them as a reference point when you do start rebuilding your wardrobe. Okay, so that is all my advice for you when it comes to the define section, which my hope for it is that it lays a really solid foundation of what you need to keep in mind as you move forward. And with that, let's move into the refine section. And the first step that I recommend you take to actually refine your wardrobe is to try everything on. Now, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. This process can be very tedious. I sometimes find it quite fun, but it can be very tedious. But the reason why this step is so important is because it's going to help you further expand on your no's and your yeses that we talked about in the last section. And it's going to give you an even clearer picture of what actually deserves a spot in your wardrobe and what doesn't. So you're probably going to try on things that you reach for every single day. Your yeses very much will work for you. Figure out why. And then you're probably going to go into the deep depths of your closet and you're going to find that sweater that you bought back in 2018 because it was on sale for $20 and you were like, I can wear this to my Christmas party. And then you ended up wearing something else to your Christmas party. And now that sweater's just sitting there and you're like, I don't even like it that much and it's kind of itchy. Just me? Okay. Now here's what I recommend to make this process a little less overwhelming. And that is to break it up into categories and don't do the entire thing in one sitting. Focus on one category at a time. Sweaters one day, pants the next, shoes after that, whatever. And you don't have to do it one day after the other. If you only have, half of your Sunday free every other week, then you can dedicate that time to it if you would like. So depending on how much you own, this is going to take several sessions, and that is perfectly okay. Rushing through this process is not going to give you the clarity that you need. You actually need to take the time to do it and to fully understand what's working and what's not. And this is also the time where we really got to buck up and be brutally honest with ourselves, okay? Is it comfortable? Does it still fit me? Am I actually gonna wear it if I haven't worn it in the past, 6 months to a year? Do I feel good wearing it? Does it align with the lifestyle and the goals that I defined earlier? And if you find something, which you probably will, you'll probably find many things that aren't working for you anymore for one reason or another, that is a sign to let it go. give it to a friend, donate it to a charity shop or a homeless shelter or wherever. Give it to somebody who's actually going to use it. And this step is actually going to prepare you for the next step, which is to identify the gaps in your wardrobe. Now, I do have an entire video about how to identify gaps in your wardrobe, which I will link above here. So I'm not gonna go through the whole thing here, but I do recommend watching that. It'll be very, very helpful in figuring out what you're actually missing and what will actually serve you. And I'll give you the most crucial advice here to help you get started. And the first thing I recommend is to make a list of anywhere from 1 to 5 items. You can be as specific or as general as you want, but my biggest piece of advice for you is to keep it small and keep it manageable for now. Building a wardrobe that you love doesn't always mean a huge overhaul. In fact, most of the time it doesn't. It might just require a few additional things to help just round everything out, help everything work together a little bit better. And this step is also something that doesn't need to happen all at once. You don't have to go sit down for the next hour and be like, what do I really need? It should come to you fairly naturally. Because a lot of the times, at least for me, I'll notice that I'm missing something in the moment. So when I'm getting dressed, let's say it's the summer, I put a dress on and all I have in my closet are sneakers and boots. And I'm like, okay, I need to go find like a pair of open-toed sandals. Or maybe it's the winter time and you're like, I have 2 sweaters and I go into the office 5 times a week and it's Antarctica in there. These little moments of clarity I find to be the most helpful when it comes to identifying those gaps. But heck, maybe you just already have some things at the top of your mind anyways. Write down what you would like. And once you've identified up to 5 items, take a breath, pause, okay? I don't want you to go any further beyond that because a lot of the times those 5 items or less are all that we need to give our wardrobe the little refresh that it actually deserves. I don't recommend adding anything more until you've actually sourced those pieces, which we'll talk about in a second, and we take the time to assess the impact that they have with our wardrobe. When we add too many pieces at once, we overwhelm our wardrobe, we overwhelm ourselves, and we don't give the pieces that we put intention behind and actually thoughtfully purchased to shine on their own and use them to their fullest potential. So take your time, trust the process, let your wardrobe evolve in a way that feels natural and intentional. Okay, so we've done our homework, we've done our due diligence. Now it's time to rebuild. This step is all about making intentional choices to fill those gaps. And there's a couple things that I want you to keep in mind as you move forward in filling those gaps to make sure that you're doing things as mindfully, as thoughtfully, and as clear as possible. First things first, you need to take a look at your budget. Upgrading your wardrobe, rebuilding your wardrobe, whatever you want to call it, does not give you permission to go outside of your financial means. There are a lot of people out there who struggle with impulse buying and overspending and going beyond their means, which ultimately leads to guilt and shame and regret. I don't like any of those things. We just need to avoid them, okay? And the most important way to actually avoid them is you gotta, check in with yourself and say, what are my restrictions? What is my budget? Now, my advice to you is to set a budget per item, okay? So not an entire budget for the 5-ish items that you're looking for. Each item should have a specific budget. Obviously, a t-shirt is going to cost less than a pair of jeans, so do with that what you will. And if you're somebody who wants to keep costs as low as possible, which who doesn't right now? Things are rough, things are rough. That's pretty much it. Secondhand shopping is a fantastic, fantastic option. I'm gonna dive a little bit more into that in a few minutes, so just hang tight, but just know that even if you are really on a strict budget, I guarantee that there are ways to find items that fit within that budget. Sometimes it just might take a little bit more time. The next thing I want you to keep in mind is how to spot longevity. The whole point of this process is to make sure that you are actually acquiring items that you will have for the long run. And yes, of course, it is natural to add items to your wardrobe over time, subtract items from your wardrobe over time, but the goal is to keep those pieces as long as possible. And in order to do that, it's important to learn how to actually spot longevity in the pieces that you're considering. So when I think about longevity, I like to split it into two different categories. Number one, the actual physical quality and construction of the item. And the other one is how it's actually going to integrate within my closet. Because of course, low quality items aren't going to last in my wardrobe, especially if they will, get holes over time or they'll pill easily. If they will have any type of aspect to them that's gonna make me not want to reach towards them, that's a problem. And the same thing goes for pieces that don't necessarily play well with the other items in my wardrobe. I saw somebody one time say that your clothes should be friends. Like they should be able to all hang out with each other. They should all be able to get along. And I firmly stand by that, because if you have a piece that isn't going to work with anything in your wardrobe or multiple things in your wardrobe, then it's going to sit unworn, and that doesn't have any type of longevity to it. So this is what I call interviewing the item before you buy it. And the one thing that I highly, highly recommend above all else when it comes to this step is to shop in person, of course, if it is available to you. Shopping in person, you're able to feel the item, you're able to check the seams, you're able to feel the weight of the fabric, you're able to look at the construction of the item. Are the buttons super flimsy? Is the zipper really flimsy? You're able to interview it a lot better. And of course, you're able to try it on, which fit is very important, of course. And whether you're shopping online or in person, you also want to consider, of course, how it's going to play with the other items in your wardrobe. If you are shopping in person, this is where having a digitized wardrobe really, really comes in handy. So you can use index, you can use wearing, and you can essentially just look at the items in your wardrobe directly on your phone and say, all right, I could match it with that and that and that, or this and this and this, whatever the case may be. But do yourself a favor and take your time inspecting items. There has been times where I've just gotten way too excited about an item that I find, especially in the thrift store, and I don't do my due diligence to actually analyze it and interview it, and then I end up with something that, goes unworn. So do yourself a solid, interview the item. My next piece of advice for you is to build on what you already own. So I've kind of talked about this a little bit in the video just as a whole, but my friend actually recommended this to me a couple weeks ago or months ago, and it's kind of just stuck in the back of my mind ever since, and I want to pass it along to you, of course. And what she said was that if you're able to identify the top 1 to 2 items that you absolutely love in each category of your closet, so your top 2 favorite sweaters, top 2 favorite skirts, whatever the case may be, you should look for pieces that complement them. Now, I know this might sound a little bit simple, might sound a little bit obvious. Like, of course, you need to, build your wardrobe based on the wardrobe that you already have. However, I found it really helpful for me. My top items are a pair of jeans, a t-shirt, basic, I know, and a pair of sneakers. Those are like my holy grail. And a few weeks ago, I was at the thrift store looking for some type of overlayer. I was looking for like a blazer or just some type of like heavier cardigan in a way. And just thinking about those items and keeping them in the back of my mind and making sure that each piece I was considering went seamlessly with those items, it was very, very helpful. And I ended up finding a suede blazer that just, really knocked my socks off. I love it. And the last thing I want to mention that I briefly mentioned a few minutes ago is that secondhand stores are your friend. Now, I fully understand that thrifting and shopping secondhand can be a little bit overwhelming for some people. It definitely is for me at times, but I do encourage you to just embrace the challenge if you can. Buying secondhand is one of the best ways to participate within the circular economy, give something a second life, and also reduce the demand for new production. Less demand, less production, less environmental harm, less waste. Now, of course, I acknowledge that secondhand shopping isn't always available and accessible to everybody, whether there's just nothing located around you, whether it's size availability, or maybe you're looking for a very niche specific item, which if that's the case, I recommend looking on places like ThredUp, which, you know, you can search and you can filter, sometimes a little bit easier than the thrift store, of course. The entire goal of me saying this is not to shame anybody for buying new, of course, but to just encourage more secondhand shopping, encourage your participation within the circular economy, because I do firmly believe that we all need to do our part to contribute to less firsthand items, and secondhand shopping is a great way to do that. All right, you guys, if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this helpful. If you were able to identify some gaps during this video, or maybe some of the yeses or the nos, drop them in the comments down below. I would love to hear kind of, you know, what your personal journey is, what you're thinking about and experiencing right now. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.